When, when someone plants a bomb somewhere, that's called terrorism. When someone puts a GPS tracker on your car, that's called surveillance. But why? What is terrorism? And who is terrorizing whom? Anne Roth will give you a practical experience.
Good evening. On the 30th of July of this year, my son turned 5 years. We had a nice birthday party. He got lots of presents, his first computer. He stayed up pretty late, so did we. Then we went to bed. 7 o'clock the next morning, there were very hard bangs on our door, and outside were the Federal Police of Germany, who were about to kick in our door and arrested my partner, André Holm, for being a terrorist. That day, a nightmare started in our life that hasn't really finished by now. And I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about the background of this case of terrorism in Germany. The legal proceedings, I'll try to keep that short. I think probably many of you have read or heard something about this. What I was invited here to talk about is that a while after all of this has started, I decided to start a weblog and describe the details, the everyday life of living with surveillance that is directed at terrorists in Germany. I'll give a short overview of why I started blogging. I'll tell you some of the stories that I blogged about and that raised a lot of attention. I'll try to also go a little bit into the reactions that I got, mostly from comments, but also from articles, people talking to me. And if there's time in the end, I'll talk a little bit about what I think surveillance does to you. André was arrested in our house. He was thrown on the floor, handcuffed, put on the sofa. I was told to wake my children. All of this happened with something like 15 armed cops who stormed into our place and screamed at us. I was told to wake up my children, undress them and give them breakfast and take them to kindergarten and then to come back. I called a lawyer, and André was taken away to some prison, some police station in Berlin. And the cops raided our place for something like 15 hours. They left around 11 at night, after having gone through all of our books, all of our videotapes, all the waste paper that we had somewhere, even the waste paper outside, etc., etc., etc. All of these kinds of things that you know from watching crime thrillers on TV, maybe. And it was pretty much like that. It's a very strange feeling to have it happen in your bedroom all of a sudden when you wake up and you look at some armed cop. And I think the only thing that I thought was, okay, so this is what that feels like. I think many of us maybe have, or maybe not many of us, but I think some of us, political activists probably, or hackers, I think, have thought of the theoretical possibility that something like that could happen. We all probably make jokes sometimes about funny sounds in our phones that someone might be listening in, or wondering whether the person who is also in the street might be some plainclothes cop. I think that's something that you don't really think about a lot. But then all of a sudden it became true in my life. My partner was gone. He was flown to Karlsruhe together with 3 others who were also arrested that very same night, who were forced to wear white suits that reminded people of Guantanamo-style suits. And they were then issued an arrest warrant by the Federal High Court of Germany for being terrorists, for forming a terrorist organization called the Militant Group. The legal construction of this case is that allegedly there is 4 so-called academics who formed this militant group, and an investigation against them was started in September 2006, as far as we know. That's what's in the files. And the initial suspicion was based on an internet research. It has been described often as a Google research. As far as we know, it wasn't done with Google, but some kind of software that is used by police. And they were looking for texts to compare them to declarations by this militant group and to do a linguistic analysis to find out whether these 4 academics may be the authors of those texts. What they were looking for were words like gentrification, precarization, frame of reference, many other words that probably very many people use, and someone has said that probably through this case now gentrification is much better known than it was ever before. They were looking for text by specific people, which leaves the possibility to say that if you publish online, and if you use your real name, and if you publish on certain topics, then that already may be the reason for an initial suspicion by the Federal Police of Germany whether you might be a terrorist. Another reason given in the arrest warrant for arresting Andrei was that he matched what the police consider some criteria they think the militant group fits, which is he had a lot of close friends. He has an extraordinary political and historical knowledge. He had no police record. He is able to write analytical texts, and he is not a member of any specific part of left-wing movements. These are the criteria that they are looking for when they look for the militant group, that they have been looking for, as far as I know, since 2001, and there is another investigation against other people who are also accused of being militant group, and so far they haven't really found anyone, I think. The third criteria for the arrest warrant was that allegedly they were using what is called conspirative behavior. For example, they didn't take their mobile phones to some meetings, or they made dates with friends and didn't explicitly say when and where exactly they were going to meet and why. For example, if you call someone and say, why don't we meet tomorrow in the same bar we always meet, that is considered conspirative behavior. Also, if you meet a friend and you go for a walk and then sometimes you turn around, or you turn around again, this is considered looking out for someone who might be watching for you, meaning you are aware that someone might be watching out for you, and that is conspirative in itself and is a reason that was given in the arrest warrant by the Federal Court of Germany to actually send Andrei and the 3 others to prison. The 3 others that were arrested with him were allegedly caught on the road after having tried to set fire to 3 army vehicles. And they were arrested, or they were followed as far as we can tell, because one of them allegedly has met Andrei twice, once in February, once in April, and in this way got into the attention of the cops that were following Andrei around. And because these 3 met, or one of the 3 met with one of the 4, it's a bit tricky, like there's 3 people who were caught trying to set fire to army trucks, and they are now terrorists because they met with one who is part of 4 people who have been considered to be terrorists since September last year. I know this is not easy to understand, but that's the way it works. 4 terrorists, 3 arsonists, this is in brackets, make together 7 terrorists who still now are under investigation. Andrei was released preliminarily from prison after 3 weeks on bail, and the federal prosecutor filed a complaint against this release, and thus the High Court had to decide whether they would grant this complaint. And this was a very important decision they made that took place on the 24th of October. And in fact, the High Court said that not only did they not grant the complaint by the federal prosecutor, but also they completely overthrew the arrest warrant. Basically saying that from their point of view, only suspicion isn't enough. That's written in this decision. And they considered not enough, or not actually any hard evidence being given by the police at all, and so the arrest warrant was taken back, but the investigation was still going on. What was very tricky about this decision is that the federal court doesn't give you any dates when they will make decisions. So after Andrei was released on the 22nd of August, we knew that this decision was going to come about the complaint by the federal prosecutor. And if they had granted the decision, Andrei would have been arrested and would have been put back into prison. And we didn't know when this decision was going to be made. So basically for 2 months we were waiting, and we knew that they weren't going to call us before and say that they made this decision. We knew that the cops were just going to show up and arrest him right away, and we were living with this situation for 2 months. Unfortunately, the decision was a good decision, and so there was no more prison for him, but the other 3 were still in prison, and then also filed a complaint against the situation of them being in prison when the main terrorist already wasn't considered such a bad terrorist anymore. So this decision was made on the 28th of November, and all 3 of them were released then also. The court also had to decide whether, or what actually they thought constitutes terrorism, and when this terrorist law of Germany should be applied, and to whom and for what. And that was quite an important decision to be made, and actually they decided that, that these 7 are not a terrorist organization anymore, but instead a so-called militant organization, which from the point of view of surveillance doesn't really make such a big difference, I think, and the investigation is pretty much the same, but the possible sentence that they will get in this law case is reduced from 10 to 5 years. The proceedings are being done under the terrorist Article 129A of the German Penal Code, and basically this has been widely considered as a method mainly to investigate and use surveillance against political activists in Germany. Only very few of the people against whom these investigations are being started are actually taken to court. The numbers vary. It's something like between 3 and 5%. For all others, there's just an investigation being carried out, sometimes a long-term investigation that goes over a year. Normally, people don't even find out that this investigation is happening. Only very, very rarely the cases are actually opened and people are being told about this. Often the cases are just being closed, a lot of information has been gathered and people will never find out. At the moment, there is, as far as we know, 4 cases happening against terrorists who are in fact political activists. There's 40 suspects against these investigations are being done, and these 40 suspects have many friends against who are also mentioned in the files, and we have a rough estimate, and we think that approximately 2,000 people are mentioned in these files that are also under investigation of some sort. Their phones being listened to, their dates being watched, people following them around, GPS or other listening devices in their car, etc., etc. The normal set of investigation, so to say, is that your phones are being listened to, also your friends' phones, your partner's phones, your family, everybody. There's video cameras outside, at least outside the houses. All of your telecommunication is being intercepted. That means all of your email, all of your internet, all of your phone calls that goes via internet. Often you have GPS and bugging devices in cars. Andrei was in prison for 3 weeks, and I realized after a few days when he was arrested that my life had changed into something very different than it had been before. It took a while to get over this shock of having your partner arrested in a situation where you really didn't think this was going to happen like that. And then I instantly turned into an expert, having to answer questions about what is prison like, what is surveillance like, how do these law cases work, what is the legal proceedings like, why is all of this happening, and what actually did he do. And all of these things were things that I really didn't know. And after a while I started thinking that some of the things that I had noticed before that I found somehow a bit funny but didn't really pay a lot of attention to may have to do with the surveillance that we were subjected to. And only after a while I was told and realized and found out that me too, I had my phone being listened to all the time since already the beginning of January of this year, that all of my email was being read, etc., etc. And I had my phone react in strange ways. Actually, I had before thought that my phone was somehow, the hardware was somehow broken because it crashed all the time. It just stopped working all of the time, and I was